finding someone with all your own.
Hey, what's up you guys? Welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be switching things up a bit because we actually have 3 individual cases. They are all linked, but I wanted to make sure each case had its own spotlight, so to speak. And I didn't want to have to sacrifice any of the details for you guys. So therefore, this is actually part 1 of a 2-part series. The first ever on this channel. So obviously if you've read the title, you know that in part 1 of this series, we're going to be discussing the disappearance and murder of Morgan Harrington. Part 2, which will be posted on Sunday, will be discussing the murder of Hannah Graham and how she stopped a serial killer. I will link that video here and in the description once it's uploaded. Alright, so let's get started. Before we get into Morgan's eventual disappearance and death, we need to go back to September of 2005. Because as far as we know, that's where the story really begins. So this story begins with a woman who I'm going to be referring to as RG throughout the video. Because she does not wish to be identified, and I think it's important that we respect her privacy. RG is from India and moved to the United States to attend college. She was 26 years old at the time of the attack and had just landed a new job after graduate school. On September 24th, 2005, RG was having a normal day and decided she wanted to go to a bookstore that was located relatively close to her townhouse, which was in Fairfax, Virginia. Something that's important to note is she didn't have a driver's license or a vehicle, so she had to walk everywhere she went. So she walked to a bookstore called Borders. Borders is basically like Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. So it also had a cafe inside. She made up her mind that she was going to purchase a few books and enjoy doing some reading there for a while. She had plans to stop by the grocery store to pick some things up for dinner on her way home. While she was there, she unfortunately lost track of time, and she ended up staying much longer than she anticipated. Once she realized what time it was, she quickly headed to the grocery store. She stopped by Giant's Grocery, picked up the things that she needed, and by the time that she was leaving, it had already become dark outside. But unfortunately, she had no choice but to walk home anyway. She made her way back to her townhouse, which was approximately a 15 to 20 minute walk. She got to the parking lot of the complex and was making her way to her townhome when a man approached her and asked her for directions. There was just something off about him. He basically had a really creepy vibe and she just felt like something wasn't right. Obviously, she was alarmed and it frightened her. She was on high alert and quickly told him that she couldn't help him. She began walking very quickly to her townhouse and she was only steps away when she heard the man running after her. She tried to run and get into her home before he could reach her. However, she wasn't quite fast enough. When the man reached her, he quickly picked her up like a baby, as she put it, and dropped her down on the curb of the sidewalk. This basically knocked the wind out of her, which in my opinion was done on purpose so that he could haul her away a lot easier. He carried her away from her townhouse, apparently dropping her several times. At one point, he grabbed her by her ankles and began dragging her out of sight of any other townhomes. At that point, he sat on her legs so she could not get away. Obviously, RG was hysterical. She was crying and began screaming for help. The attacker hit her in her head and told her that if she screamed again, he would twist her neck and kill her. It was at that time that he ripped her clothing off from the waist down. She later testified that she was a virgin at that time, and because of that, she fought him as hard as she could. RG continued to scream as the man began sexually assaulting her. The assailant then covered her nose and mouth and choked her with the other as he sexually assaulted her, telling her that he would kill her if she screamed again, but that if she let him do this, he would let her go. At some point, RG lost consciousness during the assault, only coming to when she saw headlights from a car pulling into the parking lot, at which time she attempted to scream, "Help." Obviously at that point, the assailant ran away. The person pulling in was a man named Mark Castro. He was an engineer and was friends with one of RG's neighbors and was going to watch a boxing match with him. He pulled into a parking spot, stepped out of his vehicle, and heard a woman attempting to scream for help. He ran to where RG was laying and noticed that she did not have pants on and was covered in blood. He would later testify that she was in bad shape and he thought she looked like she was about to die. While attempting to help her, RG told Mark that it was a black man who did this and pointed in the direction of which the man ran. Mark Castro ran to the area where she pointed to and screamed for the man to come out and show himself. However, Mark was unable to find him. He was not backing down though, because as soon as he had helped RG, he and his friend began going door to door looking for the man who had assaulted her. They were never able to find him. At the hospital, RG consented to having a rape kit completed while being treated for her injuries. Little did she know, while trying to fight off her attacker, she had unintentionally scratched him and had his DNA underneath her fingernails. She also met with a sketch artist that evening and described her assailant as being an African American male who appeared to be 30 or younger, was taller than her, and had a mustache and a beard. The next day, she had a black eye, pain all over her body, but especially in her neck and back, and also suffered injuries to her genitals. Police ran the DNA that was underneath her fingernails, but unfortunately, it did not match any known assailant in the database. The police did not make much progress in her case, and RG was terrified that the man would come back and find her. I mean, I'm sure after suffering through something like that, it's hard to ever feel safe again, but this man also knew where she lived, and she was scared he was going to come back and kill her. She was shaken to her core, and ultimately decided to move back to India. And her case went cold for several years with no new updates until 2009. And that brings us to Morgan Harrington's case. Sorry for interrupting, but if you're enjoying this video, please make sure to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and click the notification bell because I upload every Monday and Friday. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Casey Shane on YT. I love connecting and interacting with you guys. All right, let's get back to it. Morgan Dana Harrington was born in Charlottesville, Virginia on July 24th, 1989 to her parents Jill and Dan Harrington. She had one older brother named Alex and a dog named Kirby. The Harringtons were an incredibly tight-knit and loving family. They raised their children in Roanoke, Virginia, and though I wasn't able to find much information on Morgan's childhood, I have learned quite a bit about the dynamic of their family and the kind of person that she was. She had a lot of very cool interests and was a very layered and intriguing person. So this is what I was able to find out. Morgan was a good student and had aspirations to become a teacher. She was big on children's rights and wanted to better the world for them any way she could. Her parents considered Morgan to be a bit of a homebody and would keep to herself from time to time. She was extremely creative and was quite an amazing artist. She enjoyed reading and absolutely loved music. And from everything that I've gathered, she was an extremely thoughtful and caring person. Morgan saw the world differently than most people. She wasn't afraid to be different or think outside of the box. As I've said, Morgan was extremely close with her family, especially her dad. Their family actually had a saying, rather than simply saying I love you, like whenever they were ending a phone call or signing a birthday card, they would write the code 241. This translates to I love you too much, forever and once more. Because of the relationship that she had with her parents, she felt as if she could be completely transparent with them. She didn't feel a need to sneak around behind their back or to really break free from them like most teens do. And it's because they created an environment that allowed her to just be her. They never expected her to be anything but herself, and she was able to be open with them. And I think Morgan appreciated that. Once she graduated, Morgan decided to attend Virginia Tech at the Roanoke campus. She wasn't really ready to leave her parents' house yet and had doubts about the next chapter in her life. She just wasn't ready to go out into the world alone just yet. Nonetheless, she moved onto the campus and seemingly adjusted pretty well to a college life, though she still came home often and always visited her parents on Sunday. She would speak to them almost daily, especially her dad. I get the feeling that they were best friends because Dan would stop by the campus midweek just to see Morgan and have lunch with her. Despite Morgan's tendency to stay in and listen to music and create art, she, like the majority of the people in college, occasionally enjoyed nights out with her friends, and she found the perfect excuse to plan a night out in the summer of 2009. During that summer, Morgan discovered that one of her favorite bands, Metallica, was going to be playing a show a few hours away in October. Given that it was one of her favorite bands, Morgan did everything in her power to make sure that her and her friends would be able to attend. She mentioned wanting to go to her parents, and Dan actually decided to purchase the tickets for the girls just so that they could have a fun night out. When Morgan found out, she could barely contain her excitement. And that excitement grew every Sunday when she would go to visit her parents, because the tickets were hanging on their refrigerator for months. She was counting down the days. Morgan was a planner, so she began planning the night well in advance. Despite the fact that she was only 20 at the time, she knew she was going to want to celebrate and embrace the night. And she would most likely want to consume alcohol like most college kids do. One of Morgan's friends that was going to the concert with her decided she wasn't going to drink. So they agreed she would drive Morgan's car, but act as a designated driver so that the rest of the group could drink without having to worry about transportation after the concert. So October 17th, 2009 finally comes, and it's the day of the concert. The girls met up and got ready for the night together. Morgan narrowed in on an outfit and decided she was going to wear a black Pantera shirt that one of her friends had given her as a gift. This shirt was unique, and it was different than a typical band t-shirt. I think it was something that the friend had made, so it was one of a kind, basically. She was also going to be wearing a black miniskirt, black tights, black boots, and was wearing a large necklace. Once all of the girls were ready, they started their 3-hour trip to the John Paul Jones Arena, which was located at the University of Virginia. That arena is where they hold their basketball games, but it doubles as an arena used for concerts. On the way there, the group decided that they wanted to pregame, and Morgan and her friends began consuming alcohol on the drive. They arrived to the arena just before 7 p.m., which is when the show started. The group stopped to purchase band memorabilia, and Morgan spent all of her cash that she brought to do so. However, she did still have her debit card with her. They found their seats and settled in to watch the opening act, which was the band Lamb of God. The girls had brought Flask into the arena due to the fact that they were underage, and they enjoyed a few drinks during their opening act. At approximately 8:30 p.m., Morgan announced to her friends that she needed to use the restroom and she would be back soon. To be honest, I don't know why the other girls didn't go to the bathroom with her. Most of the women that I know and have been around usually go to the bathroom in pairs, especially in situations like this. So I do find it a little weird. But either way, Morgan left them and went to the restroom alone. I'm not sure exactly what happened next or why, but somehow Morgan ended up outside the arena. I'm not sure if she took a wrong turn or just wanted to get a breath of fresh air or what. But while I was researching these cases, I came across a photo of Morgan that appeared to be from a night out with her friends, and she was smoking a cigarette. Is it possible she wanted to go outside to smoke a cigarette, stepped outside, not realizing she may not be able to get back in? I know a lot of people like to smoke while drinking, and that just seems like a likely scenario to me. Morgan was intoxicated, but she wasn't stupid. It seems unlikely that she would accidentally walk out of the arena because she got lost. Either way though, she ended up outside of the arena, and when she tried to re-enter, security would not let her back into the concert due to their strict no re-entry policy. During the process of Morgan arguing with security, her friends noticed that she had been gone a little too long. By this point, she had been gone 20 to 30 minutes. Metallica was about to come on stage, and they didn't want her to miss it. At approximately 8:48 p.m., they called her, and Morgan told them that she ended up outside, and that security was not going to allow her to come back in. Her friends claimed that she told them to enjoy the concert, and she was going to find a ride home. Personally, I'll call bullshit on that. Okay, I am not trying to be rude whatsoever, so don't hate on me in the comments, but am I the only one who thinks this is a little bit crazy? Her friends were just like, okay, have a good one. Morgan's friend had driven them all there, and therefore had her car keys. Morgan was drunk and not able to drive herself regardless, but could they have somehow figured out how to give her the keys so she could at least wait it out in her car? The lack of concern from her friends just seems very selfish to me. They were 2 to 3 hours away from home. She had no cash on her, which they knew, no keys, and was intoxicated. And they basically didn't give a shit. Let's all take take this as a lesson that we need to look out for our friends, especially in situations where there's alcohol involved. Witnesses spotted Morgan directly after security would not allow her back in, and she appeared to be highly upset and had a scrape on her chin, which indicated that she had fallen down at some point. So she was a wreck at that point. And where were her friends? There were several witnesses that saw her in the University Hall West parking lot, as well as the Lanigan Track parking lot, though she was last spotted hitchhiking on Copley Bridge near Ivy Road at 9:23 p.m. Something that I'd like to point out is that the Lanigan Track parking lot was where taxis would line up at during big events such as concerts. It was the Uber hub, if you will. So basically, she exited the arena here, crossed the street and walked through this parking lot, exited onto Copley Road here, and then walked down towards the bridge, and she was last spotted here. That would be the last time that anyone would see Morgan alive. After the concert, her friends returned to school in Roanoke, but were worried when they did not hear from her on Sunday. But as far as I know, they did not take any action or do anything about those concerns. Morgan had plans to go home the next day, like she did every Sunday, and it was especially important that she did because her dad was supposed to help her choose her classes for the following semester, as well as balance her checkbook and help her study for an important math test that she had coming up. Unfortunately, she never made it there. Her parents attempted to contact her, which yielded no response, which sent up a million red flags for them. That was completely out of character for Morgan, and they knew something was wrong. Meanwhile, the University of Virginia's police department received a report from a lacrosse player that they had found a purse containing several of Morgan's items along the fence of the Lanigan Track parking lot. It contained Morgan's student ID, her driver's license, a small flask, and her debit card. Obviously, her parents were terrified, but they were determined to find their daughter. The next day, law enforcement discovered Morgan's cell phone in the University Hall West parking lot, which, again, is used for taxi drivers. The cell phone's battery had been removed and was missing, and the back of the phone was off but was with it. The Harringtons started spreading the word about her disappearance like crazy. They posted on message boards, posted flyers with her name and picture, and held several vigils at multiple high schools in the area. However, they never heard from Morgan. An organization called Laura Recovery Center, which is based out of Texas, came to Virginia to help aid in Morgan's disappearance. They brought in dogs to help search the grounds around the arena, and helicopters doing searches from the air, but they still found no sign of Morgan. Crime Stoppers offered a $100,000 reward, while James Hetfield, the lead singer of Metallica, made a public service announcement about Morgan's disappearance and asked people to come forward with any information they may have. And Metallica put up an additional $50,000 to help bring Morgan's kidnapper to justice. Everyone's worst nightmare became a reality when the shirt that Morgan was wearing the night of her disappearance was discovered by a man named Blaine Eckner. He was a University of Virginia student and noticed a t-shirt that was spread across the bushes in front of his off-campus apartment. He lived on 15th Street Northwest, near Grady Avenue, which was roughly 2 miles away from where Morgan was last seen. He says that he didn't think anything about it at first. The shirt was nicely spread out and was clearly out in the open. It was just very strange, but he had to drive to Richmond that day, and he just tried to brush it off. Later, while he was driving to Richmond, he suddenly remembered Morgan's description and what she was wearing when she was last seen. He said that he didn't think it actually matched the description, but felt that it needed to be reported anyway. He called his roommate while still driving to Richmond and asked him to go outside the apartment to see if the shirt was still there. It was, and the men decided they needed to contact the police immediately. The Charlottesville police arrived at the scene and collected the shirt, which ultimately ended up belonging to Morgan. There was hair and blood found on the shirt, and police were able to match the DNA to Morgan. A little over 3 months had passed without any updates. That was until January 26th, 2010, when the farmer who owned Anchorage Farms was outside driving through his fields, checking his fences. He came upon remains that at first glance looked like deer remains. He got off his tractor to check it out and realized there was a human skull lying there. He later stated that he knew at that moment it was Morgan Harrington. Obviously, he called the police, and when they arrived, they discovered that it was not only her t-shirt that the killer took. She was also missing her boots, skirt, tights, necklace, and her undergarments. The police had not contacted Morgan's family about the body yet. They typically hold off so they have a chance to identify the body first, but a reporter called Dan at work and asked him for a statement about the body that had been discovered at Anchorage Farms. I cannot imagine finding out that kind of information from a reporter in the middle of your workday. And honestly, it's kind of ridiculous that the reporter contacted him anyway. Because if the police had contacted him, then they should have been giving the family time to process that news. Dan would later go on to say that he was sick about the news. He left work immediately, and he and Jill headed to Charlottesville. I think they knew it was Morgan at that point, even if it wasn't confirmed. The medical examiner eventually did confirm that the remains were in fact Morgan Harrington's. Because the decomposition was so bad, they were unable to determine exactly when or how she died specifically. Her autopsy showed that her cause of death was homicidal violence of undetermined origin, and she had suffered a spiral fracture on her upper left arm, 2 green stick rib fractures, and a fracture to her skull. Police had no suspects at that time, but in July of 2010, they caught a small break in Morgan's case. Police held a press release and let the public know that they had DNA evidence, which was recovered from Morgan's t-shirt, and that it was linked to a case from 2005, which was still open in Fairfax, Virginia. Though they didn't have a name, because of this link, police now had a composite sketch of the person that assaulted RG and raped and murdered Morgan Harrington. This is unfortunately where her case goes cold for 5 years, until Hannah Graham's disappearance in 2014, which will bring us into part 2. This case was solved eventually, so I don't have theories like a typical unsolved or missing case, but Morgan was missing for a while, and a lot of people have a hard time understanding exactly why she took the actions that she did. In every article that I've read about this case, they all say that she was hitchhiking home. And people question why a 20-year-old girl who was 3 hours away from home would attempt to hitchhike at night. She had no clue where she was going. It was 2009. She didn't have an iPhone with the Maps feature or an Uber to call. I don't believe that she was going to hitchhike all the way back to Roanoke. If you look at the map again, there were multiple banks located just past the bridge that witnesses last saw Morgan on. There are also multiple restaurants and a 7-Eleven. Is it possible that she was either going to get some food and attempt to sober up and wait it out? Or is it possible that she was going to one of the banks to pull out cash? Or both? We all know that she had her debit card on her outside the arena because it was found later, but no cash. I think most of us have been in a situation where we need to grab some food, sober up, and figure out what's next. I have anyway. I honestly don't know how taxis worked back in 2009. Did they take debit cards back then? Even if they did, could Morgan have assumed that she needed to get cash to take a taxi home? Despite being intoxicated, she was a smart girl. She knew she wasn't going to be able to hitchhike 3 hours back home. And she knew the dangers of getting into a car with a stranger. But most of us would assume a taxi would be a safe alternative. We'll discuss it further in part 2, but police later learned that the man that did this to her was a taxi driver and was on duty the night of her disappearance. All he had to do was get her into his car. Why do you guys think she went outside of the arena? Do you think she was trying to go get cash or get some food? Or do you think she was just hitchhiking? Do you think that it's shady that her friends didn't attempt to help her? Let me know in the comments. But that's it for me today, guys. I hope you join me for part 2 on Sunday, where we'll be discussing exactly how Hannah Graham stopped a serial killer and what happened when she did. As always, remember the name, Casey Shane. I'm out.
Hi, I'm James of Metallica. Back in 2010, our band offered $50,000 to help catch the person responsible for murdering Morgan Harrington. Since that time, authorities uncovered new evidence linking her killer to a similar assault on a woman in Virginia. If you've seen the person in this sketch or have any information about this case or any others, please contact your local police or submit your information online. Remember, any information, no matter how small you might think it is, could be that crucial piece investigators need to help solve the case. Right now, there's up to $150,000 reward.